Ruchi, I got to tell you something important.
Yeah, talk to me, dude.
I hate John McCain.
So, AJ, I've got to tell you something important. John McCain is pretty much the only Republican that stands between us and a complete abandonment of all the values that we hold dear in the West.
I don't think that's right. Richard and I were yelling at each other earlier today, and we've decided to have a mini episode. It's called Everything We Know About John McCain. Just to give you a preview, I dislike John McCain, whereas Ruchit is the small child that John McCain adopted that got him into trouble in South Carolina.
I would say that I like John McCain, and in 2004 wrote a blog post saying that John McCain should run as an independent candidate for president. So I was ahead of the times. But I think AJ holds John McCain to the standard of perfection, a standard that no politician, especially on the Republican side, for him has ever met.
All right. Tom, you want to start us off with a Supreme Court case?
Sure. Just one?
Yeah, just one.
Okay, just one. All right. So have you guys heard of Expressions Hair Design in New York?
I have not.
Okay, well, they brought a lawsuit against a guy named Schneiderman, and this lawsuit made it all the way up to the Supreme Court. This case involves the statutes that about 10 states or so have enacted that allow merchants to charge higher prices to their consumers when they pay using a credit card instead of cash. But they require the merchant to communicate the price difference as a cash discount, not as a credit card surcharge. And so the question before the Supreme Court in Expressions Hair Design v. Schneiderman is, do these state no surcharge laws unconstitutionally restrict the free speech of these companies conveying price information, as the 11th Circuit has held, or are they simply economic regulations, as the Second and Fifth Circuits have held? And before you launch in, let me give you the best argument from the state's perspective. What the states are trying to do is, when you, AJ, or you, Ruchit, as a consumer, go into a store, they want you to see a price on the shelf, and they want you to know that is the price. And they don't want you to think, or they don't want you to be surprised if you're paying with a credit card when you go up to the counter and the counter guy or the counter lady is like, oh, Rooch, you have to pay an extra 5%. Whereas if you're paying with cash, they want you to have a good surprise and think, oh, I get a discount because I'm paying with cash. Does that make sense?
Yeah, this sounds like something that the credit card companies are involved in a back channel kind of way. What do you think?
Oh, almost certainly. I mean, the states, in legal terms, the state's argument is this is a pure price regulation on what the seller can have as the listed price of a product. And, if the courts were to strike it down, it would be a striking down of price regulation that sounds a lot like the Lochner times. And that was a dark period in the court's history, where they were using a lot of...
according to you, Tom.
Well, yeah, according to some folks. I guess Lochnerism is making a comeback among some conservative jurists.
Okay, so I have a mechanical question.
Yeah?
Why is the case captioned as whoever it is against Schneiderman? So Schneiderman is the Attorney General of New York. So did Schneiderman bring some sort of administrative action against the company, or what happened?
No, I think the merchants are suing Schneiderman.
Yeah, they're suing him as a representative of the state of New York.
Why wouldn't you sue? Why wouldn't it be hairstylists against New York or hairstylists against Cuomo or something? I don't know. That was not a big part of the oral arguments at the Supreme Court, but I'm sure if we write in, someone might tell us. The reason I ask is just because sometimes the posture of the case is important. So, like, is this a facial challenge where the hairstylists are going out of their way as like a test plaintiff, or has Schneiderman brought in some sort of extremely heavy-handed enforcement of what might be an unoffensive statute? I think that might be important in a case like this.
I hear you. No, this isn't it is a facial challenge. It's not some, extreme situation because, in oral arguments, they actually had a difficult time finding many examples of when this type of law was enforced. They had a handful of examples, but not too many examples. So it is not an as applied. It is a facial challenge. They're saying the law on its face is an unconstitutional regulation of what the speech that these merchants have.
This just seems like remember last episode when I was like, man, these cases are amazing. I'm so glad they're in front of the Supreme Court. Now I would like to say this case is stupid, and I can't believe it's in front of the Supreme Court.
Well, this is the exact type of case they want on an 8-0 or 8-person Supreme Court. Not too controversial, but raises some issues, I guess.
So I think I think the government's right. It sounds like this is a standard advertising regulation. It seems like there's some sort of legitimate state interest. I'm trying to remember the test for this, like from the Board of Pharmacy line through Bates v. Arizona and stuff.
Well, hold on. Before you go on, let me ask you this. You say the government is right. I think the case is a little bit more nuanced in the sense that where does the government win, right? The government could win on, hey, this isn't speech at all. We're not regulating speech. We're regulating economic conduct. Or the government could win on, well, it is speech, but, we're talking, this isn't political speech. This isn't true, like central, fertile grounds of First Amendment protection. This is commercial speech. And so that's going to have a lower burden or barrier for us to regulate. And even in that lower area, yes, the merchants have some right to this speech, but their rights don't outweigh, our ability to regulate that speech. Does that make sense?
I think it's commercial speech. What do you think, Richard?
I think it's commercial speech as well.
All right, Tom, you're off the island.
Okay. Well, okay. So both of you have decided that it's commercial speech, but does that mean the government? I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean the government wins. It could be commercial speech, but it could be an unconstitutional regulation on commercial speech.
Does anyone remember the test applied in Bates v. Arizona?
I have it pulled up here, but I don't remember. Hold on a second.
So I'm scanning Bates v. Arizona right now. It seems like the test was definitely not strict scrutiny.
Yeah, no, it definitely is not strict scrutiny. I think it's like an intermediate type of speech. It's not quite a rational basis, but it's above rational basis, and it's not strict scrutiny. So it's the same amount of scrutiny maybe that the court does to gender discrimination. I say that cynically.
So for the sake of listeners, you would say that strict scrutiny is the highest standard that can be applied. So you have to have not just a legitimate interest, you must have a compelling interest. And then in addition, it's not just that you would have some reasonable remedy, but you must have the most narrowly tailored remedy to address the compelling interest. On the other hand, for rational basis, as long as the state's interest is even remotely legitimate, and as long as there is even the slightest of connections between the government's remedy to the interest, you would uphold the government's position. So for rational basis, the court has said that it could seem ridiculous, it could seem unwise, it could seem like the least efficient way to achieve that aim. As long as it is even remotely efficient, you would say it passes rational basis. So I think the test for this kind of speech falls in between strict scrutiny and rational basis. I think Tom's right? I think they need a nexus that is more powerful than rational basis. But I actually think that the best argument in support of the government's position is that there should be some sort of consistency in the advertising of prices, right? So if you go to some establishments and the advertised price is the credit card price, and you go to other establishments and the advertised price is the cash price, and then there's small text underneath that explains what you really will be paying, that is confusing to consumers. And I think that advertising the credit card price, which is the highest possible price, is the least confusing to consumers, right? That if there is a surprise, it's a pleasant surprise that the price is lower, not it's a sad surprise that the price is higher.
Well, I mean, if that really were the state's goal, and here's me playing the devil's advocate, couldn't the state just say, well, you can't change a price difference. You can't have a price difference based on whether you're paying cash or credit. It just has to be one price. You can't offer a discount or a surcharge. You just have to offer one price, whatever that price may be.
That's a pretty heavy-handed remedy.
Yeah, and Tom, that's certainly what the credit card companies would like. And I think that is what they have proposed and probably gotten passed into legislation in some states. But all of this makes me think that, I think another decent argument, at least, that the companies or the retailers could make is a little bit of a what's next argument, which is what's next? Like, you're going to tell us, what ways we can do coupons, what ways we can bundle products, so when you buy a loaf of bread, the meat is $2 off, or so on and so forth,
Well, AJ, going back to you, why do you think that's heavy-handed?
I think that the sort of light-handed regulations that provide for consistency in the advertising of prices is much more heavy-handed than dictating what prices may be charged.
No. I'm not saying that the state dictates what prices are charged. The state simply says, look, you can charge whatever price you want. It just has to be one price, regardless of whether you're paying in cash or in credit.
Right. The state would forbid discounts.
Well, discounts
that reflect legitimate differences in the cost of providing the goods or the services.
Well, another way to say that is discounts based on cash or credit. I mean, you could obviously offer discounts for other reasons, have a sale or whatnot, but not based on whether one is paying in cash or whether one is paying in credit.
If you are concerned about consistency in advertising, that seems like a much less narrowly tailored result than to just say how to advertise prices.
I just don't think this is a problem. And that maybe that goes to the point, Tom, that you made, which is that both sides were having some difficulty in finding areas where this law had actually been enforced.
Yeah, they didn't have more than a handful of cases.
I mean, this seems like a regulation in search of a problem. It seems like something that's like a 1940s or 50s era regulation that's still on the books. I don't know.
So here's where I'm at. I think that this is an easy case. And now I'm going through the roster of justices in my mind. And I think, just thinking it through, I think Breyer, Ginsburg, Sotomayor, Kagan are all going to side with New York. And I'm trying to find a single conservative judge to switch. And I can't think of one. Is that going to be a problem?
Maybe.
I don't see Alito or Thomas voting with New York. And I actually
I don't see Roberts or Kennedy doing it either.
I know, right? Maybe Gorsuch?
No, I think you could see like one of the liberals flip on this.
So the case is captioned Hairstylist v. Schneiderman. So the court below went with New York?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to say either a 4-4 uphold or a 5-4 uphold.
I'm going to go with a 6-2 on the assumption that Gorsuch isn't there by that time. And I think the ones that you will see switch will be Sotomayor and Kagan.
So 6-2 uphold, Ruchit?
No, 6-2 side with the hairstylist.
So 6-2 reversal.
Yes, reversal, sorry.
That's
this regulation seems to me senseless, and I think that will bother at least Sotomayor and likely Kagan as well.
I'm going to say it's going to be a 4-4 uphold.
Nice. Tom's with me. You lose, Ruchit.
Until the court decides.
Until the court decides otherwise.
No, I think it's over.
So let's go to John McCain, guys.
I don't like John McCain.
And AJ, you'll have every opportunity to discuss those reasons. But maybe I want to give a little bit of background as to why we are even talking about John McCain. So John McCain gave a speech in Munich 2 or 3 days ago. And it was a pretty awesome speech, in my opinion. He talked about how this is the time where we need to defend Western values, and how the defense of Western values isn't necessarily a militarist one, but one that is an ideological defense that is maybe now more important than ever. Before we started this podcast, I sort of watched that speech again, and I was kind of struck by a couple of things. One, the text of the speech reads a lot better than the way that McCain actually delivered it.
Well, that's because McCain's not a very good speaker.
Well, it helps that when you're reading to yourself, you're not an 80-year-old former POW.
That's true. But I think towards the end, he really did sort of make his point. And so I want to highlight a couple of pieces of this speech that I think are worth reading, and then we can move into sort of why it matters or why it doesn't, for that matter. He said, this is towards the end of the speech. During one of the darkest years of the early Cold War, William Faulkner delivered a short speech in Stockholm upon receiving the Nobel Prize for Literature. I decline to accept the end of man, Faulkner said. I believe that man will not merely endure, he will prevail. He is immortal, not because he alone among creatures has an inexhaustible voice, but because he has a soul, a spirit capable of compassion and sacrifice and endurance. Go ahead.
Oh, can I say I feel the opposite way? I feel like humanity is a lot more fragile, that we have to do everything we can to make sure humanity endures. We can't.
And indeed, that is McCain's next paragraph.
Okay.
Precisely what you said, Tom. McCain's next paragraph, which is McCain here. It's not, I don't think it's Faulkner at this point. Even now, when the temptation to despair is greatest, I refuse to accept the end of the West. I refuse to accept the demise of our world order. I refuse to accept that our greatest triumphs cannot once again spring from our moments of greatest peril, as they have so many times before. I refuse to expect that our values are morally equivalent to those of our adversaries. I am a proud, unapologetic believer in the West, and I believe we must always stand up for it, for if we do not, who will? And he has another set part of the speech, Tom, that goes kind of exactly to your point, which is the universe and history does not bend towards justice. We've got to do the work to make it go that way. It's not something that is not automatic.
Rich, can I read you one of my selections from John McCain's rhetorical history?
I know that you will, AJ, so go for it.
Do you know why Chelsea Clinton is so ugly? This is John McCain when Chelsea Clinton was about 18 years old. He said, Chelsea Clinton is so ugly because Hillary Clinton is her mother and Janet Reno is her father.
I mean, I can't defend that. I'm not going to defend that. But, it's I'm not going to take everything that the guy has done and ask that it be perfect. You know what I mean? Or ask that it even be done in the right spirit,
So I guess my question is, like, why? I mean, the Trump era must be so despairing when this sort of feeble, by-the-numbers, Reagan-era American exceptionalism is what passes for courage in the United States.
I think that's right. I think it is feeble right now that you aren't seeing too many Republicans speak out. And if John McCain is given cover to those Republicans to speak to more of them, then more power to him,
But is he actually giving cover to these Republicans to speak? It's not as if we're seeing rallies of Republicans behind John McCain in the day after his speech.
Not right now, and not yet. But I'm maybe hope springs eternal, at least for me, that they eventually will, and it'll be this speech that is at least part of it.
Do you imagine John McCain using any of the official powers of his office to follow up on any of the concepts in his Munich speech?
Yes, I do. I think he will. If Trump tries to roll back sanctions, I think he and many other Republican members of Congress, hopefully with some Democrats in tow, will vote to make those sanctions permanent and part of law. And I think even if you look at sort of his opposition, or I should say not his opposition, his lack of opposition to cabinet appointees, he hasn't voted to appoint anyone that's extremely pro-Russia. They just happen to have been appointed by Trump, but I don't think he has accepted people like that.
What part of the Russian foreign policy regime has McCain actually attempted to slow down or reverse using any of the powers of his official office? So, for example, in voting for Rex Tillerson, who was nominated in part because of his obvious and widely reported ties to Russia through his position as Exxon's CEO. Exxon was a company that had lost a ton of money because of they had made overtures towards doing business in Russia, and that attempt was thwarted by the sanctions regime. And so here's someone who has an obvious interest in reversing some of the United States sanctioned regime against Russia. And here's someone that John McCain is voting for to be Secretary of State. I mean, he didn't even seem to raise a fuss about it. It's not like he even said that he was reluctantly voting for him. He just did it.
Well, I think he asked a lot of questions, right? He asked a lot of questions about Tillerson's inclination to support Russia, his inclinations to roll back the sanctions. And listen, everything Tillerson's done so far has been like, I mean, I wouldn't have appointed Rex Tillerson, but honestly, everything he's done has been consistent with a McCain view or even a Democratic view of how one should deal with Russia. He hasn't done anything.
When Tillerson was first appointed, John McCain said in interviews that there was a snowball's chance that he would vote for Tillerson. And sometime around the middle of the confirmation process, McCain said, "Oh, actually, you know what? I'm fine with it." And there's no explanation that I've been able to find for why McCain reversed course. I mean, do you have a theory about why McCain changed his position?
Yeah, I think it's called the hearings. I mean, during the hearings, Tillerson was, he was pretty straight up. And here's the other theory actually that I have, which is that who's the former Homeland Security Secretary? Not Chertoff. No, Bob Gates actually. Bob Gates started vouching for Tillerson, like around maybe a week or 2 weeks or so before the confirmation hearing started. So if you look at it, you can look that up and you can see. So I think that would be my theory for why a lot of people voted for Tillerson. They said, well, listen, Bob Gates has been tough on Russia. He wouldn't endorse somebody that was going to be weak on Russia.
Do you want to know another John McCain fact?
Also, Condoleezza Rice praised Tillerson as well, by the way.
Oh, well, Bob Gates and Condoleezza Rice, that's like, just give him a Nobel Prize already.
You asked why would he have supported him? I think those are two credible people that supported Tillerson. And so, they're definitely credible within the Republican establishment. So
538 has a cool feature on their website. They show different members of Congress, and they have an analysis of the district or state that they represent. And they say, here is what we predict someone from this jurisdiction, how often they would vote for Trump. So John McCain represents a state that Trump won by 3.5 points. That's a fairly close vote margin. The predicted score, the predicted agreement rate that McCain would vote with Trump is 68%. And in fact, he votes with Trump 94.4%, which is plus 25 percentage points.
So we're only, a month in, AJ. And so there hasn't been a lot of votes relating to Trump that have already happened. There have been some cabinet picks, but there hasn't been too much else. So I think it's a little early.
And AJ, if you look at this data, at least the way I'm looking at it, of the Republicans, he is second to last, right, or third to last of the Republicans, right, that vote with Trump. It seems like almost every single Republican except for 4 has 100% vote with Trump rate, except for Murkowski, McCain, Paul, and Collins.
Yeah, I think they should all be embarrassed.
So, AJ, not much has happened yet. So, I mean, I think they should be embarrassed if they don't speak out and criticize Trump. But I think maybe a little bit of this story, it's too early to tell. You know what I mean? I think you can rightly criticize John McCain for stuff he's done in the past, but I think I think with these speeches, he is going a little bit out on a limb in a way that no other Republican is doing.
So what aspect of John McCain's entire career do you think recommends him as a man of principle?
I don't know. I mean, you could look at his views on immigration. Those, I think, have been like relatively principled, even ones that you would probably agree with. His views on campaign finance reform, that's been relatively principled. Then let's not forget his 5.5 years as a POW, unless you subscribe to the theory that you like people that didn't get caught. So those are just some. So
John McCain is genuinely a war hero, and I don't know if there's any way to talk around that, but since
you said what parts of his career,
what parts of his congressional career, I'll give you campaign finance. That actually is a genuine accomplishment, even though most of that bill has been overturned by the Supreme Court.
Well, I mean, he tried, right? You got to give him credit for that. And then bipartisan immigration reform. There's another one. The other thing that you have to think about is, are you defining him as honorable based on whether or not you agree with him, or are you defining him for just being consistent? You know, like what's your definition?
The things he's been consistent about has been, not integrating the military based on gender. He is staunchly against choice. He is staunchly for whatever will increase the military's budget. His one vote against Trump has been in voting against Trump's Office of Management and Budget appointee. I think it was Office of Management and Budget. It was someone who McCain thought was
it was Mulvaney,
insufficiently supportive of expanding the military's budget. I mean, this is a person who holds basically straight up and down, not just Republican views, but right wing Republican views. Right, like the thing.
No, I don't think so. I think he holds Republican views. I mean, that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. I think what I'm talking about doesn't have to do with whether he's actually a Democrat. Of course, he's not. It has to do with his sort of views in defense of some of the other aspects of Western values, as he outlined in his speech.
I just think the space between John McCain and Sarah Palin is rhetorical, but not political. Like, I don't think there's a policy difference between John McCain and the Tea Party, right? I think, right? So you give him campaign.
That's news to them, probably.
Well, okay. So he has not quite been so anti-immigrant, but I mean, he is a wacko bird. He plays both sides. He calls the Tea Party wacko birds, and so they don't like him for that. But that's a rhetorical thing. Like, when does he vote against them?
He hasn't been anti-immigrant at all.
He was on the Gang of Eight for the immigration bill that his party then abandoned without him putting up much of a fight. They trotted out Marco Rubio to be the face of the bill, and John McCain didn't fight any harder for it than Marco Rubio did, which was barely at all.
No, I don't think that's true, AJ. I think he lost, but I mean, losing isn't the same as not fighting. I mean, I think you're really reducing your argument to I don't agree with him, and to he hasn't won on the things that I do agree with him on. I mean, that's hardly lack of honor or lack of courage.
So here's the core of my argument. The core of my argument is that John McCain is a bog standard Republican, that you wouldn't be able to find much sunlight between John McCain and your average Republican. And the key thing that distinguishes him has nothing to do with what he does in the official capacity of his office as a senator, right? It has to do with the fact that the media is particularly soft on him. He is a particularly good talk show guest. And people write these glowing puff pieces about him when the half of the things that they say are basically untrue. So there's a New York Mag profile of him from this week. And New York Mag is an incredibly liberal organization. I mean, I like them. I think that they do a good job. But there's no way around the idea that they are, they are a particularly liberal outlet. And they let all sorts of things slide without without actually ever fact checking them. So they they quote John McCain saying that the Democrats are just off the reservation. The way that they're behaving with respect to the Gorsuch nomination is, he says, quote, "I've never seen anything like this. Just keep your flak jacket on, steady as she goes," he says to Gorsuch. And he's quoted saying, this is someone who participated in blocking the Merrick Garland hearings and then said in the middle of the campaign that if Hillary Clinton is elected, that he would participate in blocking any of her Supreme Court nominees for 4 or 8 years or however long it takes. Later in the article, they say, there's a portion of the article that says McCain has supported all of Trump's cabinet picks. That's no longer so it says McCain has supported all of Trump's cabinet's picks: Rex Tillerson, Jeff Sessions, Betsy DeVos, Tom Price, Scott Pruitt, save one, Budget Director Mick Mulvaney, whom he views as anti-military, and then quotes John McCain. "I've always given presidents the benefit of the doubt on their nominees," McCain told me. "With Obama, there were a number of nominees I had concerns about that I voted for. I think elections have consequences." So I went and read that, and I looked up McCain's voting record, and actually here are some people that McCain voted against confirming. You want to hear some? Loretta Lynch, Julian Castro, Chuck Hagel. It's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous the things that McCain gets away with.
No. Here are the ones that he voted for. He voted for Hillary Clinton. He voted for Eric Holder. He voted for Hilda Solis. He voted for Ron Kirk, which I know is just trade, but still, that's somebody that he voted for. So, nobody's saying that he didn't vote for any of them, but he did vote for some of them, and that's factually correct.
I just think that the way that people, you included, treat John McCain as though he's some sort of exceptional figure among the conservative movement, that he's someone that should run as an independent because liberals ought to like him or things like that, have nothing to do with his policy positions or his record. He gives a decent stump speech in Munich, and suddenly he's, the second coming of, Woodrow Wilson.
No, I don't think so. I think what people are pointing out, I think there's a couple of things that are being pointed out here. One is that he's speaking, other Republicans are not. Now, you might say, well, who cares? That's like a weak comparison. Maybe you're right, but the point is he is speaking, and he deserves some credit for that. Because it's not easy to speak against the president of your party, and especially to speak about him in the ways that McCain has chosen to speak about him. So I think the jury's out on how many of Trump's sort of policies he will oppose, but there haven't been a lot of policies yet. There have been some nominees, and the nominees haven't been that offensive, frankly. From McCain's perspective, or really, the most offensive nominee that he's had, definitely Betsy DeVos, but again, I'm talking about like foreign policy. I'm not talking about domestic policy. The essence of his speech is a foreign policy speech.
Ruch, can I ask you a question real quick?
Yes, sir.
So the LA Mag that we linked to says that, had that article that the title of which was "Republican John McCain just utterly annihilated the entire Trump agenda for 4 minutes." And then the subtitle is, "This may go down as the speech the senator is remembered by." Do you agree with that?
So I don't agree with the first part. I do agree with the second.
You don't think he utterly annihilated the entire Trump agenda?
No, I don't think so.
Some portion of the Trump agenda yet remains?
I think he did make a very strong criticism against the part of the Trump agenda that has to do with, it's not about the tax agenda or any of that, but Trump's sort of general worldview as in terms of us against them, in terms of we're on our own and we don't need to be worried about our allies or about our relationships abroad. I think he did do a really good job of taking that apart. And I do think, when you watch the speech, in a way it's hard to think that this is going to be the speech that he's remembered for, just because it wasn't delivered particularly well. And it was to a room that wasn't even full. But I think the content of the speech is really powerful. I really do.
Tom, where are you at? Should John McCain be remembered for all time for his Munich speech or the Chelsea Clinton joke?
I'm pretty ambivalent on John McCain. I feel like he, at least at this portion of his career, is someone who is really good at getting publicity for himself. But I guess, to Richard's credits, not much time has passed in the Trump administration, even though it may feel like a lot more. And the question is, what is his talk actually going to translate into some sort of action that is worthy of respecting? Because right now it hasn't.
The one thing I will say to John McCain's credit, this New York Mag article does say that McCain has been pushing for a select committee to investigate Trump's ties to Russia, and that Mitch McConnell
that's a good point.
Won't grant one. And full credit to John McCain, that would be great. It would be great if there were a select committee, but it's sort of the amount of capital that McCain is willing to stake to achieve that select committee. It doesn't, at least is not apparent now, right? It might be something that we will learn about in the fullness of time, but there doesn't seem to be, it seems like he's very willing to let newspapers report that he's asked for a select committee, and he doesn't seem very willing to do anything about it from the floor of the Senate.
He's made a lot of speeches to the effect, even on the floor of the Senate. So I think what you're saying is, unless he decides to pull a Ted Cruz and read Green Eggs and Ham, he's not serious?
Well, the other question is, could this be another form of setup for future publicity, right? Like, it's not so crazy to say that there's going to be more Trump-Russia evidence that leaks in the future. And if some bombshell does drop in the future, you have the media going to John McCain, who's been saying from day one there should be an investigation. You know what I mean? Like, John McCain just is posturing himself without trying very hard to set himself up for future publicity.
All right, let's put a cap on it. Our democracy is a shambles. We ought not have a judiciary. Should John McCain be allowed to be in the Senate? Ruchik, go.
Absolutely.
Tom?
I don't think so. I think someone should run against him, and we need some fresh faces in the Senate.
Yeah, I'm with Tom.
Can I give you guys my Hail Mary?
Okay.
Idea that the Democrats should take.
This is ridiculous. I saw this earlier today.
It is, and I think they should try it. They should try and recruit Lindsey Graham, Susan Collins, and John McCain to become independents to caucus with the Democrats. I think it would make those three people extremely powerful. And I think they could remember when the Dems did this with Jim Johnson? Do you guys remember that? Like back when Bush had just become president. And I think a year in or something like that, Tom Daschle convinced Jim Johnson, who was an independent from Vermont, I think. Or no, he was a Republican from Vermont. Or maybe it was some other state, I forget.
I think it was Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. They convinced him to become an independent, caucusing with the Democrats.
Whatever happened to Jim Johnson?
I think he lost soon after.
Yeah.
Doesn't that tell you everything you need to know?
Well, so think about it this way. McCain's got 6 more years. He just won re-election. Susan Collins isn't up for 4 years, and she's from Maine. And, the other senator from Maine is also an independent. And then Lindsey Graham has 4 more years as well and is wildly popular in South Carolina. So, I don't know. I don't think it would really hurt them to just say we're Republicans on everything except foreign policy. And in Susan Collins' case, why does anybody know why Susan Collins is a Republican, actually?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Like, she's with the Dems on the environment. She's with them on social issues. I guess she cares about the balanced budgets that the Republicans are never going to pass. I don't know.
I don't know enough about Susan Collins. I think Maine is a really weird state.
I guess that's all I have to say about John McCain and what the Democrats should try. I think it's worth a shot. Why do you think it's so crazy, AJ?
I think that the country is in a weird spot right now where people who were intransigent and completely unreasonable towards President Obama just 2 or 3 years ago now look much more responsible now that we live in Trump's America. And so you have people that even just 18 months ago, it would have been ridiculous to try to pick them off as independents, like Lindsey Graham.
I think you can get them to agree with you on foreign policy, on some of these intelligence issues, and they're the most moderate of the Republicans that you can, and they're safe from a re-election perspective.
I have a secret. the only thing that any of these people could do that could convince Lindsey Graham or John McCain to abandon ship is if you could convince them that Trump wanted to raise taxes.
I don't know, man. I think this Russia thing could make some further strange bedfellows. At least this is my hope.
All right. Well, we'll see. I think there's a lot of fat to trim in this episode. So I think we've got like 50 minutes of recording, and I think we can probably make like a 35-minute episode out of it. But I think we're good to call it.
Sounds good, dude.
What do you think, Tom?
I'm ambivalent.
Classic Tom.
Classic Tom. Mike Flynn had discussed and attempted to undermine President Obama's sanctions on Russia, and that allegation was unconfirmed until recently, and the Washington Post confirmed it based on unnamed sources in the intelligence agencies, and Mike Flynn eventually resigned from his position in the Trump White House.
So my follow-up question to that is, how is that not treason?
Because treason is defined as the taking up of arms against the United States in the Supreme Court precedent on the Aaron Burr issue.
Okay, I guess that makes it not treason.
This is worthy of an episode in and of itself. What is treason? Because as more and more facts come out, I think we will have ample opportunity to test the limits of what is and is not treason.
So Aaron Burr, after he was done being vice president, moved to the Mexican Texas territories and raised an army with the intent of leading an armed insurrection against the United States, and was tried for treason, and the Supreme Court said that there was not enough of a factual nexus between Aaron Burr and the actual taking up of arms against the United States for him to be convicted of treason.
Can I ask you, I'm not familiar with this area, was the court saying that's the only form of treason?
Yes.
Or this is an inclusive form of treason?
I mean, raising an army but failing to take up arms is not treason. So it sort of seems like, so what Mike Flynn did was arguably illegal because there are laws against people who are not part of the official government of the United States in conducting foreign diplomacy. But those laws are not laws against treason. They're just laws against unauthorized conduct of diplomacy.
Yeah, why are Republicans the standard bearers for protecting the decline of the West?
Because the Democrats haven't done anything. They don't offer a values-based approach to the West. They have a multiculturalism and a scheme of values that's sort of multi-valued, I guess. So they don't have like a unitarian value system.
I mean, is progress and equality not a set of values that folks can rally around?
I think it's too abstract, right?
Is it?